March 2014. The morning fog hung thick over Brazos County as three unmarked police vehicles pulled into the gravel driveway of 247 Elm Street. Sheriff Detective Maria Rodriguez was reviewing case files in her car when her radio crackled with confirmation that would change everything. What began as a routine DNA evidence review had transformed into the arrest that would finally bring justice to a family who had waited 50 years for answers. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe because we're covering details that mainstream media completely missed about this shocking case. The victim at the center of this decades-old mystery was 17-year-old Patricia Lynn Morrison, born April 15, 1948 in Bryan, Texas. Standing 5 feet 4 inches tall with distinctive auburn hair and emerald green eyes, Patricia was known throughout her community for her infectious laugh and her habit of wearing her grandmother's silver cross necklace. She was the eldest daughter of Robert Morrison, a local hardware store owner, and Helen Morrison, who worked as a seamstress from their modest 2-bedroom home on Cedar Street. Patricia had 2 younger siblings, her brother Michael, age 15, and sister Susan, age 12. Patricia was the kind of girl who would give you her last dollar if you needed it, recalled her best friend Margaret Chen in a 2010 interview. She had this way of making everyone feel special, like they were the most important person in the world when she talked to them. Patricia's English teacher, Mrs. Dorothy Williams, remembered her as exceptionally bright, with dreams of becoming a journalist. She was always asking the hard questions, always wanting to understand the why behind everything. Patricia harbored ambitious dreams of attending the University of Texas at Austin to study journalism, despite her family's modest financial circumstances. She worked part-time at Henderson's Five and Dime on Main Street, saving every penny for college tuition. Her daily routine during the summer of 1965 was predictable. She would wake at 6:30 each morning, help her mother prepare breakfast, walk the 12 blocks to work by 8 o'clock, and return home each evening by 6:15 for family dinner. Bryan, Texas in 1965 was a tight-knit agricultural community of approximately 27,000 residents, where everyone knew their neighbors and unlocked doors were the norm rather than the exception. The town centered around Texas A&M University and the surrounding farming communities that grew cotton, corn, and raised cattle. Main Street bustled with local businesses: Patterson's Drug Store, the Brazos Theater, Miller's Bakery, and the First National Bank of Bryan. The social climate reflected the changing times of the mid-1960s, with the civil rights movement creating tensions even in this relatively peaceful community. The downtown area where Patricia worked stretched for 6 blocks, lined with oak trees planted in 1923 as a memorial to World War I veterans. Henderson's Five and Dime sat between Murphy's Shoe Repair and the Brazos County Library, a location that placed Patricia at the heart of the community's daily life. Church attendance was nearly universal, with the Baptist, Methodist, and Catholic congregations forming the social backbone of Bryan's identity. On Saturday, August 14, 1965, Patricia Morrison followed her usual weekend routine, unaware that this would be her final day alive. The timeline of her last hours, painstakingly reconstructed by investigators, reveals a day that began normally but ended in tragedy. 6:45 a.m. Patricia woke and helped her mother prepare pancakes and bacon for the family breakfast, as confirmed by her brother Michael's statement to police. 8:30 a.m. She arrived at Henderson's Five and Dime, where store owner Frank Henderson noted she seemed cheerful and excited about her date that evening with Tommy Richardson. 10:15 a.m. Customer Mrs. Eleanor Patterson purchased fabric and recalled Patricia mentioning she planned to make a new dress for the upcoming church social. 12:30 p.m. Patricia ate lunch at Murphy's Diner with co-worker Linda Foster, discussing her college application essay about the future of small-town America. 2:45 p.m. She returned to work and spent the afternoon helping customers and restocking shelves, according to Frank Henderson's detailed statement. 5 p.m. Henderson locked up the store, and Patricia began her walk home, witnessed by postal worker James Crawford. 5:25 p.m. Patricia stopped at Patterson's drugstore to purchase lipstick, her final confirmed public appearance, witnessed by pharmacist Robert Patterson. 6:45 p.m. When Patricia failed to arrive home for dinner, Her mother, Helen, contacted the Richardson family to ask if she had gone directly to meet Tommy. 8:30 p.m. After confirming Patricia never arrived at the Richardson home, Robert Morrison contacted the Bryan Police Department to report his daughter missing. The discovery of Patricia Morrison's body came 18 hours later, on Sunday morning, August 15th, when local farmer Ernest Tucker was checking cattle in his pasture 3 miles southeast of town. Tucker found Patricia's body in a shallow ravine near Wixon Creek, partially concealed by fallen branches that appeared deliberately placed. The crime scene revealed disturbing details that would haunt investigators for decades. Patricia's body was positioned face up, her arms crossed over her chest in what forensic experts would later describe as a presentation pose, suggesting the killer wanted her found. Her distinctive silver cross necklace was missing, along with her purse and the small amount of money she carried from her work earnings. Physical evidence collected included several strands of dark hair that didn't match Patricia's auburn color, found clutched in her right hand, suggesting she fought her attacker. A partial footprint in the soft creek bank showed a size 10 work boot, with a distinctive wear pattern on the heel. Investigators also discovered tire tracks from what appeared to be a pickup truck, approximately 50 yards from where the body was found. The medical examiner, Dr. Harold Fitzgerald, determined that Patricia had been strangled, likely with some type of rope or cord, that left distinctive marks on her neck. Time of death was estimated between 6:30 and 8 p.m. on Saturday evening. Most troubling was evidence suggesting Patricia had been held somewhere else before being brought to the creek location. First responder Officer Danny Martinez later recalled, "I'd been a cop for 12 years, but I'd never seen anything like this. This was someone's daughter, someone's little girl. The way she was positioned, it was like the killer was trying to tell us something." Do you live in a small town like Bryan? It's terrifying how these crimes can happen anywhere in any community that feels safe. The Bryan Police Department in 1965 consisted of Chief William Harper and 8 officers, with limited resources and no dedicated detective division. Forensic capabilities were primitive by today's standards, relying primarily on fingerprint analysis and basic photography. DNA testing wouldn't be available for decades, leaving investigators dependent on witness testimony and circumstantial evidence. The initial investigation focused on 5 primary suspects, each with apparent motives and opportunity. First was Tommy Richardson, age 18, Patricia's boyfriend and planned date for that evening. As a senior at Bryan High School and son of prominent rancher Charles Richardson, Tommy seemed unlikely, but couldn't be ignored. Investigators discovered Tommy's relationship with Patricia had become strained over her college ambitions, which he opposed. His alibi placed him at his family's ranch from 4 p.m. onwards, helping with cattle, confirmed by 3 ranch hands and his father. Second suspect was Marcus Wheeler, age 24, a drifter who had been working temporary construction jobs around Bryan. Wheeler had been seen near downtown Bryan on Saturday afternoon and had previous arrests for assault in neighboring counties. Several witnesses reported seeing him acting strangely near Main Street around the time Patricia left work. However, Wheeler had checked into a Houston boarding house Saturday night with a time-stamped receipt, making the timeline impossible. Third was Robert Bobby Jensen, age 19, who had asked Patricia to the church social but been rejected in favor of Tommy Richardson. Jensen worked at Miller's Bakery and harbored obvious resentment toward both Patricia and Tommy. His supervisor confirmed Jensen worked until 4 p.m. Saturday, but couldn't account for his whereabouts afterward. Jensen claimed he spent the evening at home reading, but lived alone with no corroborating witnesses. Fourth suspect was Frank Henderson, age 38, Patricia's employer at the Five and Dime. Henderson was a bachelor who lived alone and had shown particular interest in Patricia's college plans, often engaging her in lengthy conversations about her future. Some community members found his attention inappropriate for a man his age. Henderson's alibi was that he went directly home, after closing the store, and spent the evening listening to radio programs, again, with no witnesses. The fifth and most intriguing suspect was David Paul Whitman, age 26, a recently returned Vietnam veteran who had been exhibiting erratic behavior since his discharge. Whitman lived with his elderly parents on a farm near Wixon Creek, close to where Patricia's body was discovered. He owned a pickup truck matching the tire impressions found at the scene. However, Whitman's parents provided a strong alibi, insisting he had been home all evening helping his father repair farming equipment. Each suspect was thoroughly investigated within the capabilities of 1965 police work. Fingerprints were collected and compared against prints found on Patricia's personal items recovered at the scene. Hair samples were taken for microscopic comparison with the strands found in Patricia's hand. Polygraph tests were administered, though their reliability was questionable by even contemporary standards. The investigation's momentum gradually slowed as each lead failed to produce concrete evidence. By December 1965, with no new developments and mounting pressure to solve other crimes, the Patricia Morrison case was effectively shelved, though never officially closed. The case went cold, due to several factors converging simultaneously. The Vietnam War was escalating, drawing away young men who might have been witnesses or sources of information. Chief Harper retired in early 1966, and his replacement, Chief Raymond Foster, prioritized reorganizing the department over reviewing old cases. Most significantly, the physical evidence collected in 1965 was stored improperly, with much of it deteriorating or being lost during a 1967 flood that damaged the police station's basement evidence room. By 1968, the Patricia Morrison murder had faded from daily conversation in Bryan, remembered primarily by her family and closest friends. The case file was transferred to storage, where it would remain largely untouched for decades. What time is it where you're watching? It's amazing how 50 years can pass while a family waits for justice. The Morrison family's response to Patricia's murder and the subsequent lack of resolution shaped their lives profoundly for the next 5 decades. Robert Morrison, Patricia's father, channeled his grief into relentless advocacy for improved police investigation techniques. He spent his own money traveling to conferences and training seminars, learning about emerging forensic technologies and constantly pressing law enforcement to apply new methods to his daughter's case. Dad never stopped believing we'd find Patricia's killer, Michael Morrison, now 65, recalled in a 2015 interview. He kept a box of newspaper clippings about forensic advances, DNA testing, anything that might help solve cold cases. Even when he was dying of cancer in 1998, he made me promise to keep pushing for answers. Helen Morrison dealt with her loss differently, becoming deeply religious and finding comfort in memorial activities. She established an annual scholarship at Bryan High School in Patricia's name, funding college education for young women pursuing journalism. Every August 14th, Helen organized a memorial service at Patricia's grave, attended by diminishing numbers of community members as years passed. Mom would say, "Patricia wanted to tell stories and find truth." These scholarships let her keep doing that through other girls, Susan Morrison Clark explained. Susan, the youngest Morrison child, struggled most with survivor's guilt, often wondering why Patricia was taken instead of her. She moved to Dallas after high school and became a victims' rights advocate, working with families of murdered children. The Morrison siblings each developed different coping mechanisms and memorial traditions. Michael named his first daughter Patricia and kept detailed scrapbooks documenting every development in the case, no matter how minor. Susan established a garden at Bryan City Park with a bench bearing Patricia's name, where she would sit for hours during visits home. The family's relationship with law enforcement remained complicated throughout the decades. While appreciating ongoing efforts, they frequently felt dismissed or patronized when inquiring about progress. Robert Morrison's detailed knowledge of forensic techniques sometimes intimidated officers, creating tension during meetings. Family gatherings were forever altered by Patricia's absence. Holiday traditions changed, birthday celebrations felt incomplete, and graduation ceremonies carried extra poignancy. The family never moved from their Cedar Street home, partly hoping Patricia might somehow return, partly unable to let go of the last place she had been alive. Over the decades, the case was reviewed multiple times as new technologies emerged and leadership changed within the Brazos County Sheriff's Department. In 1978, Detective Lieutenant Frank Morrison, no relation to the family, applied enhanced fingerprint analysis to evidence, yielding no new results. In 1985, the case was reviewed again during an initiative to solve old murders using improved crime scene reconstruction techniques. In 1994, when DNA analysis became more widely available, the Patricia Morrison case was among the first cold cases selected for genetic testing. Unfortunately, the biological evidence had deteriorated significantly, and the DNA extracted was insufficient for comparison against any database. The family's hopes were raised and crushed repeatedly through these failed attempts. In 2001, advances in low copy number DNA analysis prompted another review. This time, scientists were able to extract a partial genetic profile from the hair strands found in Patricia's hand. However, the profile was incomplete and couldn't be definitively matched to any suspect in the database. Each technological advance brought renewed media attention and fresh hope for the Morrison family. Local newspapers would run anniversary stories, television stations would produce special segments, and briefly, the community would remember Patricia Morrison again. But inevitably, when the new technique failed to solve the case, attention would fade once more. Bryan, Texas transformed dramatically during the 50 years following Patricia Morrison's murder. The population grew from 27,000 to over 84,000 residents. Texas A&M University expanded significantly, bringing urbanization and demographic changes that altered the town's character forever. Main Street, where Patricia worked at Henderson's Five and Dime, underwent complete redevelopment in the 1980s. The small family businesses were replaced by chain stores and franchise restaurants. Henderson's building became a coffee shop, then a boutique, and finally part of a parking lot for a modern shopping complex. The Creek area where Patricia's body was discovered was developed into a residential subdivision in the 1990s. Wixon Creek was diverted and partly covered, with houses now sitting near the location where Ernest Tucker made his grim discovery 50 years ago. What's the weather like where you are today? Sometimes I think about how many seasons of grief this family endured, waiting. The breakthrough that would finally solve Patricia Morrison's murder came on March 12, 2015, during what seemed like a routine case review. Detective Maria Rodriguez, recently assigned to the cold case unit, was applying newly available genetic genealogy techniques to the partial DNA profile obtained in 2001. Using advanced database searches and family tree reconstruction, Rodriguez identified potential genetic matches to the unknown DNA profile. The process involved comparing the crime scene DNA against genetic information voluntarily submitted to genealogy databases, then tracing family lineages to identify possible suspects. The technology that cracked the case represented a revolution in forensic investigation. Genetic genealogy combines traditional DNA analysis with genealogical research, allowing investigators to identify suspects through distant relatives who have submitted DNA to ancestry websites. This technique requires only small amounts of degraded genetic material, making it perfect for decades-old evidence. Dr. Margaret Foster, the genetic genealogist who worked on Patricia's case, explained the process. We take the unknown DNA profile and search for partial matches in public databases. Even if the perpetrator never submitted their DNA, their third or fourth cousins might have. We then build family trees backwards and forwards to identify potential suspects. The process took 3 months of painstaking research, tracking genealogical records through courthouse documents, cemetery records, and historical archives. Researchers had to account for adoptions, name changes, and family relocations over multiple generations. The name that emerged from this genetic detective work was shocking to everyone involved. David Paul Whitman, the Vietnam veteran who had been investigated and cleared in 1965. Now 76 years old, Whitman had spent the intervening decades as a respected member of Bryan's business community, owning a successful auto repair shop and serving on various civic committees. If you're finding this interesting so far, please hit that like button because the revelations about this man's double life will absolutely shock you. David Paul Whitman's life after 1965 presented a disturbing study in compartmentalization and deception. Following his initial questioning in Patricia's murder, Whitman had gradually built a reputation as a reliable businessman and community contributor. His auto repair shop, established in 1968, became known for honest dealing and quality work. Whitman married Barbara Chen in 1967. and they raised 3 children who knew nothing of their father's dark secret. He coached Little League Baseball, volunteered at church fundraisers, and served 2 terms on the Bryan City Council between 1981 and 1989. His business sponsored youth sports teams and contributed to numerous charitable causes. Most disturbingly, Whitman had maintained contact with the Morrison family over the years, occasionally expressing sympathy for their loss and even attending Patricia's memorial services. In 1985, he approached Robert Morrison at one such service and said, "I can't imagine your pain, Bob. I hope someday you get the answers you deserve." Psychological experts later explained that this behavior, while shocking, was consistent with certain types of killers who derive satisfaction from inserting themselves into their victims' ongoing stories. Dr. Sarah Williams, a forensic psychologist, noted, "Some perpetrators are compelled to stay close to their crimes, to experience the ongoing grief they've caused. It provides them with a sense of power and control." Whitman's business record showed he had consistently donated money to the Patricia Morrison Memorial Scholarship Fund, established by Helen Morrison. He had also volunteered for several searches when other young people went missing in Brazos County over the years, presenting himself as someone committed to community safety. Neighbors described Whitman as quiet but helpful, always willing to fix a car problem or lend tools. His wife Barbara later told investigators she had never suspected anything unusual about her husband's behavior, though she recalled him having occasional nightmares and periods of depression that he attributed to his military service. Perhaps most chilling was the discovery during the search of Whitman's home of newspaper clippings about Patricia's case spanning 5 decades. He had methodically collected every article, every anniversary story, every mention of the Morrison family's ongoing quest for justice. On March 15, 2015, at exactly 6:30 a.m., a team of 6 law enforcement officers arrived at David Paul Whitman's modest ranch-style home on Elm Street. Detective Rodriguez led the arrest team, carrying a warrant based on the DNA evidence that had finally connected Whitman to Patricia Morrison's murder after 50 years. Whitman was in his kitchen drinking coffee and reading the Bryan Eagle when the officers knocked. His first words upon seeing the badges were, "I wondered when you'd finally come." He offered no resistance and seemed almost relieved as Detective Rodriguez read him his rights. The search of Whitman's property revealed disturbing evidence of his obsession with the case he had created. In addition to the newspaper clippings, investigators found Patricia's silver cross necklace hidden in a toolbox in his garage. They also discovered detailed maps of locations around Bryan marked with dates corresponding to anniversaries of Patricia's death. The community's reaction to Whitman's arrest was one of profound shock and disbelief. Many residents had known him for decades as a reliable businessman and seemingly decent person. The revelation that Patricia Morrison's killer had been hiding in plain sight for 50 years shattered many people's sense of security and judgment. Longtime customer Janet Peters told reporters, "Dave fixed my car for 20 years. He was at my daughter's wedding, for God's sake. How do you live with someone like that in your community and never know?" What theories did you have about who the killer might be? Let us know in the comments below. David Paul Whitman's trial began on September 14, 2015, in the Brazos County Courthouse, just blocks from where Patricia Morrison had worked 50 years earlier. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Robert Chen, presented overwhelming genetic evidence linking Whitman to the murder. The key testimony came from Dr. Margaret Foster, the genetic genealogist, who explained to the jury how DNA evidence collected in 1965 had finally identified their suspect through revolutionary new techniques. The probability that this DNA belongs to anyone other than the defendant is approximately 1 in 2.8 billion, Foster testified. Patricia's surviving family members provided victim impact statements that moved the courtroom to tears. Michael Morrison, now the family spokesman, said, "Patricia would be 67 years old today. She might have been a grandmother, a successful journalist, a force for good in this world. David Whitman stole all of that from her, from us, from everyone whose life she might have touched." Whitman's defense attorney argued that the DNA evidence, while compelling, had been contaminated over 50 years of storage and could not be considered reliable. However, this argument failed to convince the jury, especially given the discovery of Patricia's necklace in Whitman's possession. Throughout the trial, Whitman showed little emotion, occasionally taking notes but never testifying in his own defense. When the guilty verdict was read on September 28, 2015, he simply nodded slightly and clasped his hands. Judge Martha Rodriguez sentenced Whitman to life in prison without the possibility of parole, stating, "Mr. Whitman, you have lived 50 years of freedom that you stole from Patricia Morrison. You attended her memorial services, comforted her family, and presented yourself as a decent member of this community, while hiding the truth of your heinous crime." The resolution of Patricia Morrison's murder had profound impacts beyond simple justice. The case became a landmark example of how genetic genealogy could solve decades-old crimes, leading to increased funding for cold case units across Texas and other states. The Morrison family established the Patricia Morrison Cold Case Foundation, providing resources to help other families navigate the complex world of forensic science and legal advocacy. The foundation has assisted in solving 12 other cold cases throughout Texas since 2016. The case also led to changes in evidence storage procedures and protocols, ensuring that biological material is preserved properly for future technological advances that may not yet exist. Police departments nationwide began reviewing their evidence storage systems after seeing how 50-year-old DNA could still yield results. The Patricia Morrison Memorial Scholarship expanded significantly after the case's resolution, with donations pouring in from people inspired by the family's decades-long quest for justice. The scholarship has now helped 43 young women pursue journalism degrees at universities across Texas. Most importantly, Patricia Morrison is no longer just remembered as a murder victim, but as a young woman whose death sparked advances in forensic science that continue to bring closure to other grieving families. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe to our channel for more in-depth coverage of cases that mainstream media overlooks. Share this video with others who appreciate thorough investigation into cold cases that never should be forgotten. What other unsolved cases from your area do you think deserve this level of attention? Leave your suggestions in the comments, and remember that justice delayed doesn't have to mean justice denied.